Dialectical behavior therapy was created in the 1980s by Marsha Linehan in Seattle, Washington.
Today, DBT is taught all over the world.
We're two therapists who believe everyone can benefit from DBT skills.
I'm Kate.
I'm Michelle.
And this is DBT and Me.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 13th Q&A episode.
Lucky 13. Pretty crazy.
I was going to say, isn't it unlucky 13?
It is, but I'm going to switch it up.
Okay.
I'm going to say it's lucky.
Lucky, here it is. We're going to change what the meaning of the number is.
Yes, totally.
Either that or some sort of horrible plague will fall upon us as we record this. We'll see. One way or another.
A horrible plague. What could that look like?
Horrible curse? I don't know, man.
No more bad things.
No more bad things. All right, Michelle, it looks like you're starting us off.
Yeah, I do get to start us off. So this was a post in our Facebook group, and it says, "This is the first year I started DBT. My mom is always making smart-ass comments like, 'Aren't you supposed to be using skills?' My whole family knows about DBT. My parents did family connections. They met with my therapist once with me, and then just them alone. This year, my family doesn't walk on eggshells, so obviously there were lots of triggers, but it was my most skillful year ever. I did not react to a single thing. I didn't do it for attention or reward. I just thought a comment from at least my mom would have been nice. I would have been happy with one word or even a text. Should I make a comment saying I wish I was acknowledged, or suck it up and accept that you don't work hard for other people?"
I totally get the sentiment behind this. My first reaction is never suck it up. I mean, that may be too broad of a thing because, anytime you use always or never, you're being hyperbolic, and there's probably an exception somewhere. But on average, I hate the idea of sucking it up.
Yeah.
That, to me, comes with a big dose of, not acknowledging yourself, not validating yourself, just various and sundry ways of being a dick to yourself. So I would never lean into that wording because I think it can be a little dangerous. But that all being said, I do think the most important thing to do first and foremost is focus on how your skillfulness, how your work on being skillful impacts you, right? Because that's, we can't change other people, we can't control other people, we can't guarantee any certain kind of reaction from other people, and so to farm out too much to the reactions of other people can be, again, kind of dangerous, right? It can be very emotionally destabilizing, I think. And so I would encourage this listener and anybody else who's feeling pretty disappointed in maybe how people did or did not respond to them behaving skillfully, to focus on, well, what did being that skillful feel like for you? How did that change your experience of the situation? So being self-congratulatory and, because that's what matters. You were skillful. Yes. It's just, I don't know, not quite end of story, but right, that's the thing that's important, and learning to have your own experience be the primary judge of whether you were successful or not, and what that means, I think, is really important. That all being said, dear man, I think, could be a skill to be used if this listener or other people listening decide to ask for that acknowledgement, right? Just to set up a nice, go through the dear man skill step by step. I think we don't want to go do that right now, but we do, as per most things, have a whole episode on it earlier on in the podcast. But yeah, go through your dear man skill, set up a nice request, explaining what you want and why you want it, and maybe you get it, but also maybe you don't. So that's why I think my first point is the one I wanted to go for first, because even if you do an absolutely perfect and abjectly skillful dear man, your family still might not respond the way you're looking for. So focus on yourself and your own experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When I read through this too, it was funny because Kate and I, while we're reading through listener posts or listener emails, we both start thinking about what we want to say in response to the listener. And sometimes we have very different ideas about what skills could be helpful or just what our thoughts are. And Kate literally said, "Dear man," just seconds before I did for what would be helpful with this one. So I really want to echo that.
It.
Yep, you totally did. I was like, I was going to say "Dear man" would be helpful. So we were both very much united on that, listener, that "Dear man" is probably going to be your most helpful skill here to use if you're really wanting a skill to talk with your family members about the acknowledgement that you're seeking from them. But I just want to also, I guess, kind of give, I don't know, some validation here, and also maybe playing devil's advocate ever so slightly for the family member. So I'll explain. But I'll start off by first saying that I really heard a dialectic here when I was reading this post. This dialectic of how it's hurtful when we're not acknowledged, and our progress is still important and it matters. So just because we didn't get that praise and acknowledgement, it does not in any way mean that we failed or that we didn't do good enough in any way. No, you still made progress. Your progress is still important. And it just also feels hurtful when we don't feel seen by the people in our lives when we really want to be seen by them. I think this is especially true when it comes to parents. I talk about this with my clients sometimes, is like, you know, if you think about when you're a little kid and you color a picture and you go up to your mom or your dad or whoever your caregiver is and you say, "Look what I drew." And if they were to be like, "That doesn't look like a cat." Like if they have any kind of reaction that's less than, "Oh my gosh, what a beautiful drawing," it stings. It hurts. And that's probably at the heart of what you're feeling here. So I really want to acknowledge that experience because it's hard no matter how old we are when we don't get the acknowledgement that we're seeking from the person we're seeking it from. The thing that I want to say, where I said, well, this might come across as being a little bit of a devil's advocate, but just wanting to give maybe some kind of an explanation so that you can maybe look at it from this perspective that it's not you for why you didn't get acknowledgement from them. Maybe this applies, maybe it doesn't. But sometimes people really struggle with giving verbal praise or any kind of overt acknowledgement of someone doing well. They may think it in their head, but they might not express it. Because sometimes people struggle with giving praise either because they didn't really receive it very much, so they're not really sure how to give it. Maybe they are super perfectionistic themselves and hold themselves to a really high standard and hold others around them to a really high standard. So even if you did way, way better this year than you normally do, they just might be the type of person that if you got 99 things right and one thing wrong, they're going to focus on the one thing wrong. And that's not on you, listener, if that is the mindset that they are in. Sometimes people also struggle to give praise just because by acknowledging where somebody else is doing well, it can almost feel to them like an acknowledgement of where they are doing poorly in their lives too. So let's say, I don't know, you and a friend have both decided, like, this year I'm going to go for a walk once a week. And then your friend texts you and is like, "Hey, I did my walk this week. I feel so great." And you're like, I didn't do my walk. Might be a little harder to praise that friend if they're excelling in something that you might be struggling with, because it can be a reflection of your own shame that you're feeling. So people can struggle to give praise for a wide variety of reasons, no matter how well you might be doing. So pick and choose from that what you think might or may not apply to your family members, but that could also be some possible explanations that it's not a reflection of how well you did. It's just stuff that they could be struggling with themselves.
Hearing you say all that, Michelle, actually made me want to add one other thing to that sort of list of why people might have a hard time giving praise.
Yeah.
Is that they may just be so used to you not being skillful that you being skillful through everything out of homeostasis.
Sure.
Like if you're the person who's normally acting up and that's how they can that's what they can blame their own actions on, but they don't have that to blame now, or, I don't know, it just, changes the system, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they may not have been ready or prepared for those changes. They may have thought they wanted them, but then not have enjoyed them the way they thought they would, right? Like, there can be a whole lot of weird complexity.
Yeah.
If you're the one who's, quote unquote, the one in the family to be difficult or to have problems or to whatever, right? If you sort of stopped playing that role to an extent, they may not have known how to handle that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that could also impact that, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great thing to add on there. Yeah.
On to the next one.
On to the next one.
All right. This one, I think, is also a post from the Facebook group. Are these
It
all
is.
posts from the Facebook group this time?
Oh.
No, not entirely.
Yeah, not entirely.
Just most.
Most. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so this one says, "Hello, everyone. I wonder who I should listen... Oh, sorry. I wonder who should I listen to? My wise mind or my psychiatrist? They are completely different opinions. It is a serious and important to me issue. P.S. I made sure it was my wise mind many times."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this listener and I, we did go back and forth commenting on the Facebook post, and some other listeners jumped in on this thread as well when this came up in the Facebook group. So I'm going to try to not, I don't know, get super in depth, because I could spend a lot of time on this topic. But I will suffice it to say that at the end of the day, you are the expert on you. I think Kate and I, coming from this perspective of being therapists and working in the mental health field, I say this to my clients a lot because it's true. I see them 1 hour out of the week.
Yep.
One. Some clients I see less than that. Some clients I see once every other week, or some clients I only see for 1 hour a month. And even when I am seeing my clients and I'm meeting with them, I'm still not getting to be like a fly on the wall in their life, because they are pausing their life to sit down and talk with me for that hour that is their therapy session. So I don't get to see the fight that played out between them and their partner. Like, I don't get to see it. I get a small snippet of my clients' lives, and all that I know beyond that is just what they share with me. And so there's a lot that us as mental health providers, we miss, or we just don't know, because we can't know, really. And so when it comes to having this, issue that you're grappling with of like, do I listen to myself or do I listen to my psychiatrist? It's one of those things where I don't know what this important issue is to you. I don't know what the topic is at hand, but generally speaking, across the board, not to completely throw out whoever you meet with, your psychiatrist, your psychologist, your therapist, your life coach, whoever, not to just completely throw out what they are saying, but to also recognize that they are probably going to say some things from time to time that just don't fit for you. They're going to say some things, they are well-meaning, they're trying to help, and there also are probably going to be some factors that they are either completely unaware of or that they have overlooked that you are aware of because you are living your life day in and day out. And you may check that with your wise mind and go, you know what, in this case, what really feels best to me is different than what they suggested. And okay, I would say that is more important than to take the word of your mental health provider as being, the word of law, like, this is what I have to do, this is what I have to follow. It absolutely isn't. It's guidance, it's a suggestion, it's something to consider, but it is not something that you ever have to do, someone that you have to listen to. You get to ultimately make that call for yourself, is where I come from on this.
Well, as you wanted to echo the dear man thing for the one above,
yeah,
I want to echo a lot of what you said. It's actually something that I say to my clients at every first 30-minute consultation I do, even with new clients, right? I go, I'm like, my viewpoint is that you are the expert on you, right? And I'm just here to try and use my education to help you as best I can, with shit in your life. But ultimately, you're the boss. You're the boss. You're the expert. I can't ever be. So I echo a huge amount of what Michelle was saying as well. The only thing I would sort of add to that is to try and see if you can take take what you can, or take what works, like with or for your wise mind, from what your psychiatrist says. So maybe, right, again, as Michelle said, we don't know the specifics of any of this. So this is all sort of generalized advice that may or may not apply at all in a particular moment. But generally speaking, I would say, what's the phrase? Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right.
Right? Like maybe go over whatever it is your psychiatrist is saying and see what, if anything, maybe there isn't anything, but at least look to say, all right, wholesale, this thing doesn't work for me, but this piece, and that one over there, that's something that I can take from or glean from what my psychiatrist is saying that does feel like it resonates with my wise mind. This does feel like it fits or suits me or is doable or whatever, right? Like, so I would just add in a little bit of take a look at what they're saying to you and see if you can have a takeaway message that is helpful, rather than just being like, well, this thing doesn't work in its entirety, so I'm just gonna throw everything out, rather than finding what might work with it. So yeah, but good job finding your wise mind. I know it can be hard to be sure, and I understand the listener wanting to say, I made sure it was my wise mind.
Yeah. Yep.
Because
Yeah.
I totally get that. I think there can be a lot of, I don't know how to put that. Well, some therapists / psychologists tend to think they are the expert on you, so that's part of it. But also there can be this idea that if you're ever thinking something contrary to your therapist, they're the ones that are inherently right. Like, it can't possibly be your wise mind if you're disagreeing with your therapist, because your therapist is,
They know everything.
They're all smart and educated and centered. Like, that's nice. And, as Michelle said, really, you are the expert on you. So anyway, but I understand why you might want to say, no, really, it was my wise mind, because I think there can be this kind of bias towards thinking that if you disagree with your mental health professional, then you must be the one that's wrong. And I highly disagree with that. So.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And I don't want us to go back and forth too many times, but I thought of something else too that's come up for me a couple times with therapy, is that sometimes my therapist will say something to me in a session, and right off the bat, initially, which honestly is sometimes me just being willful, but sometimes I am really like, nope, that doesn't apply. Like, sometimes she says things that fit immediately, and I'm like, yes, that, that is so good. Then there's other times she'll say things and I'm like, nope, and I just dismiss it right away. But then sometimes, like, I give it a week or I give it 2 weeks, and then I'm like, oh, yeah, that thing she told me a couple sessions ago, now I kind of get it, or now I can, kind of like what Kate was talking about. I can pull something from that now feels helpful to me. Maybe in that moment I wasn't ready to hear it, but then I give it some time and then I am ready to hear it. So that can also be an experience that comes up, I think, sometimes too with this topic of, like, do I listen to myself or my mental health provider? Like, sometimes it's really this combo of both, of like, maybe at first you don't, and then maybe you come around, or maybe at first you do, and then later you're like, never mind.
Yeah.
I thought what they said would be helpful. Tried that. Not really. So it can look a bunch of different ways. But, yeah.
Awesome. I think you're on. I know you just talked.
I am. Yes. So this one reads, I have been a sentimental person for as long as I can remember, and am beginning to wonder if it has a lot to do with childhood trauma / rejection / abandonment. Does anyone have any thoughts on this, and if DBT can help with this? I have lots of stuff I need to go through and know that it will be difficult to let go of all of it, even though I know I need to. Ugh, it is a little overwhelming, but hoping 2021 will be a year of cleansing in many ways.
I totally get that. I think Michelle is going to talk a little bit more about the idea of it being connected possibly to childhood trauma and things like that.
Yes.
I just want to say I too am a sentimental person who has a hard time letting go of shit. Not, stuff, also known as shit. So I have books. Well, not books. I have boxes and boxes at different times in my life. I have had many boxes of just random sentimental stuff that I had no purpose, no hope in using in any way, shape, or form in the future. Just stuff. So I just wanted to start by saying I have a lot of empathy for that. So that's that. But leaning into the DBT skills, what are some things that might be helpful? One of the first things I thought about is sort of a version of check the facts, especially where you're getting into your wise mind in order to look at that. So, what is this thing really? How do I, what purpose does it or doesn't it serve in my life, right? What's the worst case scenario if I get rid of this thing, right? There might be, there's this emotional sense of, I'll miss it, or I'll crumble without it, or whatever. Something that comes up for me is, will I forget this thing, right? If I let go of, if I let go of this object, will I lose this memory or things like that? And the honest answer is no, I'm not. It's a nice reminder. It's a nice thing that's connected to it, but I have that memory either way. And then the last thing that I wanted to say is just remember that you can honor your feelings without doing what they would have you do, right? You don't have to pick. You don't have to shut down your emotions entirely and just be in your logic side, right? That wouldn't be wise mind if you were just in your reasonable mind, right? But, having those emotions, being tender with them, acknowledging them, validating them, doesn't mean you then have to do the thing they want you to do, which in this case may be throw out nothing ever, right? There is a balance to be had where you can be, you can honor your feelings, you can validate your feelings, you can be tender with your feelings, and still let go of or get rid of the things that you need to. So those are my thoughts there. What about you, Michelle?
Yeah, I love that. We basically kind of wrote down on our notes very similar idea, right? You wrote down, remember you can honor your feelings without doing what they would have you do. And I wrote down being in tune with your emotions without letting them run the show.
That's true. I didn't see that.
So we're basically saying more or less the same thing. Wise mind is probably going to be the DBT skill that's going to be most helpful for you here. And Kate spoke to that really nicely, and how reasonable mind might tell you to throw everything away, and emotion mind will tell you to keep everything. So how to find that balanced place. The other skill that I'll recommend that might be helpful, which is, one of Kate's favorite skills, but I had it as an idea to talk about it in this context, is to do some self-soothing. So while you are going through things, how can you try to make that a more pleasant, enjoyable experience? How can you have music on that you really enjoy? How can you, maybe burn a candle if that's something that you like to do? Wear comfy clothes that you feel good in. Whatever it is, try to have it be that when you are going through the stuff and setting aside time to do that, that you are doing some self-soothing as you engage in that process of combing through things, so that you can maybe be a little more regulated than you might be otherwise, since this is something that might feel challenging to do. In terms of the question about, is this connected to childhood trauma? Well, this is going to be a different answer for everyone. And I am in no way saying, listener, because I don't know you, I don't know your situation, I'm in no way saying that you are a hoarder. What I will say is that I have hoarders in my family. So my mom's mom, my maternal grandmother, is a hoarder. She was a hoarder throughout my mom's life growing up. So in childhood, my mom, wasn't able to have friends over very often or things like that, just because she was ashamed of how her house looked with the hoarding that my grandmother was doing. And my uncle, so my mom's brother, inherited some hoarding tendencies, and so did my mom, though they look very different. My mom is a very organized hoarder, and overall she keeps it more or less at bay. She likes to collect certain things, though. She likes to collect buttons and dice, and she has lots of random things that she accumulates, but she keeps them in boxes, and she keeps a very, very clean home. However, if some type of trauma and tragedy were to hit tomorrow, who knows what that could potentially do in terms of how that might trigger or change the way she currently handles her her items and stuff. So I've seen this. I've seen this in my family when it comes to wanting to hold on to sentimental things and wanting to hold on to non-sentimental things.
Yep.
Because what my grandmother hoards is newspapers and books. But for her, I mean, honestly, those do feel sentimental in her mind. Her rationale for hoarding newspapers all these years has been because she wants to read the obituaries of people who died. And that feels sentimental to her, you know. So everyone has different reasons for why we hold on to our stuff. And I've seen firsthand what that can look like when it is hoarding. And how just, I think, when you live in a house with somebody who was a hoarder, how that can affect you in adulthood, where either you kind of follow in those same footsteps or some people reject those footsteps or things like that. But hoarding, generally speaking, tends to have some kind of trauma component, without question. If any of you watched the show Hoarders on A&E, oh man, some of those stories from the people who are hoarding are just horrific. Lots of tragedy in their past, lots of loss, lots of grief. So it can be something to look at for yourself of, am I holding on to some of these things because they remind me of someone that I've lost or something important that I've lost, and I feel like by holding on to this thing, I get to keep a piece of that person or a piece of that place or a piece of that memory with me that, you know, I'm worried I'm going to lose if I get rid of it. Kind of like what Kate was talking about. You know, what's the fear of letting go of this item, and am I keeping this in a response to something traumatic that has happened to me? Maybe the answer is yes. Maybe the answer is no. But that can be something to take a look at, because there can be some threads there between wanting to hold on to things and having experienced something traumatic, either in childhood or as an adult, especially related to loss of some kind. If you have a therapist, this would be a fantastic thing to look at and explore with your therapist to see if you and your therapist connect some of those dots of whether that is true for you or whether that is not true for you, with a connection between childhood trauma. But suffice it to say, that is a possibility for why this might be a challenge for you. And just to be really kind to yourself if that is the case, because it's a pretty natural reaction that a lot of people have when they've experienced loss. It's like, I lost this place, this person, this thing that was really important to me. I don't want to lose anything further, so how can I hold on? It's a pretty common thing. So
yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. All right, I think this is the last one, and I would say maybe arguably our hardest question on this Q&A.
Yes. So the next one reads, what if you inherently just don't enjoy life itself as a concept? What skills do you practice?
Yeah, so this listener sent us a longer message than just this, but this was in essence the main question that was being asked. This is kind of how they ended what they sent to us, was asking this. So this is a big philosophical question that we could probably spend an entire episode trying to answer. And ultimately, Kate and I don't have this answer for this listener. We don't. We're going to share our thoughts, but everyone has to find their own reason for why enjoy life. My answer for why I enjoy life might be very different than why Kate enjoys her life. And might be very different than why my husband enjoys his, or why, you know, my neighbor enjoys hers, or whatever it is. We all have different reasons for why we do or do not enjoy life. So the question that I would essentially turn back around to this listener is asking, what is it about life that you don't enjoy? Because they say life as a concept, which is where this gets a little sticky, and I think Kate's going to talk about this maybe a little more in her response. So there's a difference between I'm not enjoying my life as it currently stands, and I don't think I would enjoy life no matter what. what I will say about some of the other things that the listener included in this message, which is a factor for why I'm about to suggest or say what I'm going to, is that there are a lot of big, awful, bad, terrible, horrible things that happen in the world every single day. Life is filled with hardships. Life is filled with challenges. Life just can feel like just the biggest chore ever some days, especially if you are struggling with depression or PTSD, or so many different things. If you're struggling with certain medical conditions, just getting out of bed and trying to live life at all can be a huge task that feels very insurmountable some days. So yeah, life is definitely not sunshine and rainbows. And so what do we do with that when it's really not feeling that way? And what I suggest is coming back to mindfulness, because mindfulness is not about the past. Mindfulness is not about the future. Mindfulness is about what is right here, right now. And even more specifically, mindfulness is about what we can observe through our senses. So mindfulness tends to also be very focused on not just the present moment, but what can we really observe, describe, and participate with in our immediate environment and within ourselves. So mindfulness really, I think, takes that huge, big picture view of, oh my God, life is shitty and the world is falling apart, and narrows it down to what are you experiencing right now, and how can you just be with that and notice that. And so it can make the big overwhelmingness of life into smaller bite-sized chunks, is how I think about it. The other thing, though, that again this listener kind of alluded to in their message is that because the world is big, bad, terrible, awful, horrific things happening day in and day out, that's a big reason why it's hard to enjoy life as a concept, because there's all these horrible things that have happened for years that are going to continue happening. So that sucks. And what do you do with that? And what I think really applies there is try to figure out what you can do to live in alignment with your values and to enact change in this world. So if you are, let's say, driving to work every day and you see that there are multiple people who are, without shelter and without food sitting on the side of the road with signs asking for help, and that gets you down every day, just thinking about how awful and tragic that is, what can you do to try to improve homelessness in your community? What can you do to volunteer? What can you do when it comes to an issue or concern that you have about the state of the world? What can you do to be part of the solution to that concern and to that issue? And there are thousands of organizations all over the world doing amazing work. How can you be a part of that work so that maybe you make a small difference, so that things aren't as big, bad, awful, terrible as they might have been otherwise if you had not tried to make any kind of a difference? It kind of is this really cliche idea about we are all just one drop in the bucket. But if there's millions and millions of drops in the bucket, then the bucket fills up with water. And how can you make an impact on the world around you in a way that feels really positive, that feels really hopeful, so that you feel like you're making an impact on other people's lives in a positive way? So that's what I suggest. But what are your thoughts on this, Kate?
Yeah, it's a big question.
Yeah.
So the first thing I think about is maybe, again, we can't be entirely in someone else's lived experience, but I've been some version of there. I can't remember if I've referred to this incident on the podcast before. I may have. But I tell it with some amount of mirth now, because there's parts of the story that in retrospect are funny. But the lived experience of it wasn't at all. There was one time in my 20s where I had to call out sick from work because I woke up. I woke up and was alive still. And the sheer fact that I was still alive was so overwhelmingly upsetting that I couldn't stop crying for hours. And so I couldn't go to work selling things because I couldn't stop crying. And the part that becomes funny is I worked for a very macho, manly boss dude at the time who had no fucking idea what to do with this 20-some-odd-year-old girl calling him weeping and saying she couldn't work because she was weeping. Because I was so upset I couldn't even come up with some sort of lie, and I also literally couldn't stop crying, so it was obvious that I was crying on the phone. And he was just so flustered and had not a fucking clue what to do with that. And that's funny. But the lived experience of it was awful, right? The sheer fact of being alive was so awful that I couldn't stop crying. So I feel like I have a version of having been there at least in my life. So first thing I just want to get out there, possibly. It sounds like a thing I say a lot now that I think about it. Anyway, I have empathy for your struggles, listener. I have, suicide attempt in my past, and like, there's a lot, right? It's hard being alive, it can be hard. So I get that. Another thing I get to an extent is the idea of humans being a plague upon the earth. This is sort of like what Michelle was saying, speaking a little bit more to some of the broader concepts that were mentioned in the message that we got from this listener. But I do occasionally find myself, when I'm in some of my darker moods, being like, yeah, good God, humans suck, right? Like, just this idea that, if the earth wanted to, shake violently and fling us all into space, I wouldn't be surprised, right? Like, I get it, right? There can also be this perspective of just how awful we are, but the way that I kind of bring myself around from that is, to an extent, the more true that is, the more the world needs people who give a shit. Like, the worse our environment gets, the worse our political climates might get, the worse everything might get, the more people who give a shit are needed, right? We need people who care about other people. We need people who care about the planet. We need people who care about animals. We need people who care about social justice. We need people who not only have values, but have values and want to take action, which is again kind of referencing back to what Michelle was talking about, right? The giving a shit is often part of what hurts so badly, and that makes sense, but pain can also be a motivator. Like, the more it hurts when you look out and see the world, the more motivation you might have to make a positive difference. Like, you can channel that pain, that anger, that frustration, that rage, even that hopelessness into action and into positive action. So, like, they're not comfortable emotions. Right? Michelle and I try to work very hard on not ever referring to emotions as negative or positive, right? But those emotions are certainly uncomfortable. But again, discomfort motivates change, motivates action. So I think there's a space to recognize the value of that pain, of that despair, even. Because if we were all just running around happy-go-lucky, skipping down the sidewalk, not seeing any of the pain and the devastation and the horrors of the world, then the bad shit wins. Because it's taking action. Right? Bad shit is keeping going, whether we're paying attention or not, whether we're impacted by it or not. And if you're not impacted by it, you're often not as motivated to do anything about it. So that's part of what I was thinking about when I was reading what this listener was talking about. The other thing that I thought about is sort of a balance to that is, what do you focus on daily? There is, as both Michelle and I have reiterated several times in this particular response, a lot of really fucking awful shit going on every minute of every day, period. And also, there's a lot of amazing, spectacular, unfucking believably awesome things happening every minute of every day. Always. They're both true. This is the dialectic of existence. So what are you paying attention to? Much like wise mind needs to have a balance of both, I am not trying to encourage you or anyone else to become a Pollyanna. As we were saying, if we just focus on the good things and live there, in my opinion, we're going to be little shits. Because we won't have that empathy, we won't have that caring, we won't have that understanding for the negative impacts, the pains, and the devastations and the horrors of what are going on. So don't put away entirely the bad stuff. It's important to recognize it. It's important to know that it's there. It's even important to take action to try and help solve, fix, ameliorate, whatever, that stuff. But don't live there either. Don't live in the shit. Because the good stuff is there too. It is. It's a weird thing, but one of my favorite things to do when I am feeling abjectly overwhelmed by the horrors of the world is to Google the phrase, this week in science. There's like this little infographic I don't know who the fuck makes it. Maybe multiple people make it, and it's just a thing that happens on the internet. I don't know. But I think these little pictures will show up and it will tell me things that have been going on in science in the last week. Discoveries being made, inventions that are being created. I never cease to be positively flabbergasted by the shit that science is doing. Oh my god, it's so cool, right? That is one way that I help balance my teeter-totter when I need to remembering good things. There's also, at this point, there's that show Some Good News. There's an email that I get. I can't remember the name of it, but it's basically a subscription. Or no, I don't know, what's that called? An email list? Anyway, a woman who sends out emails to anybody who's on the email list. That's only happy news. Right? So, there are ways that you can intentionally, I particularly use, I'm on multiple social media platforms, but my Reddit specifically is a happy place. It is filled with silly animals and baking and houseplants mostly, and occasionally cool scientific facts. That's pretty much the entirety of my Reddit feed. So if I need to go a place where it's just things that make me go, that's fucking cool, or just make me happy or squee because it's cute, I can go to my Reddit page. I highly recommend to everybody that if you're on multiple social media platforms, pick one to be your happy place, where you don't let anything bothersome in. So you have a retreat, you have a place where you can go. That's an incredibly long-winded way of saying good and bad both exist. Don't focus on either one to the exclusion of the other. And some of the times that I find myself the most depressed is when I realize that I am letting go too much of my focus on the positive things that are going on in the world. And the last thing, and the thing that I tell myself and have told many clients around suicide, is if you're dead, the options are gone. Your life will never get happier. If your life has been particularly unhappy until this moment, that's the note you're going out on. If you die right now, right? You also can't have an impact on the world if you're dead. That speaks to a lot of what Michelle and I both have been saying about turning what's going on for you into action. But it's just, that's it. My beliefs. Sorry, I should own that. Many people believe in an afterlife, and or reincarnation. So I'm not, I don't know what your particular spiritual beliefs are, listener. I'm not trying to squash on anybody else's toes. My belief is that death is the end of things. And so I never know. I never know if tomorrow would be the day that I realized how wrong I was about wanting to die. And so that's something that I have used personally and professionally with folks. You never know when tomorrow might be the day you learn how wrong you were about wanting to die. So, yeah.
Oh, good thoughts. So, to wrap up this Q&A, we wanted to reach you guys another post that we had in the Facebook group that Kate and I just both really liked the message. We thought it was really uplifting. So to close out this Q&A, I'm going to read this out loud for you all. So the listener who posted this said, "Happy New Year. I hope this year of 2021 is your time to rise, to burst up from the dark depths of your pain, sorrow, and trauma, to break free from the heavy, bolted down chains that hold you down. Rise up with a roar, like a phoenix unlike no other. Strong, brave, bold, unstoppable. This is my hope that I am fighting for you. Sobriety, and not just in the sense of alcohol and drugs, but sobriety from toxic ways, sobriety from the loss and trauma in your life. Together, but for ourselves, we can change, find happiness within ourselves and for each other. To heal and grow our minds and our bodies, to be healthy mentally and physically. There is nothing worth fighting for than love. Love for yourself and love for others. You are beautiful inside and out. You are strong, and you are stronger than you think. There is still light within. Find that light and let it shine brighter than the sun. Rip the darkness that covers it, the darkness of your pain and sorrow. Destroy it, obliviate it from your heart and soul, and shine." And then to wrap up every Q&A, like we do, send us emails at dbtmepodcast@gmail.com or make posts in the Facebook group if you're a member there. The other thing that also feels important to say is that Kate and I love it. And we've been getting a lot of posts in the Facebook group lately. We already have enough material already laid out for our next Q&A episode. The next Q&A episode is already booked, you could say. And the one after that is already quickly filling up. So please keep reaching out to us. And also, it may take us a little while before we answer your questions on a Q&A, and we may not be able to answer every single one. So, we are definitely moving into the new year with lots of great stuff to keep coming to you guys in future Q&A episodes, and we're excited about that. So, all right. Thanks for being here, everybody.
Thanks so much. Talk to you guys soon.
All right. Talk soon. Bye-bye. To learn more about us and the DBT skills we're teaching each week, join our Facebook group. Simply log in